Just preparing the live stream. Okay, lovely. So, good evening, everyone. We'll see a notification flashing. You'll probably have two notifications flashing up as you enter the room. One, this meeting is being recorded. So, if you don't want to be in the recording, if you don't want your beautiful face on lmpg.co.uk, you can turn your screen. Oh, talking of beautiful faces. Hello, Richard. You can turn your video off and you can mute yourself, or if you're feeling even shyer, you can exit and watch this live on our Facebook group, because this is being shared on our Facebook group as well. So good evening and welcome to the most pessimistically titled webinar that we've done so far this series. We're with Roma Finance, Steve Smith of Roma Finance tonight. Do you want to say hello, Steve?
Hello to all.
And Steve's going to be taking us through how to work through an economic disaster, and indeed, what on earth is an economic disaster? How do we classify that? So we partnered up with Roma Finance. If you're not aware of our relationship, we partnered up with them January of last year, which was peak COVID pandemic, if anyone remembers that. So we're always hesitant when it comes to partnering with finance companies at LMPG, because there's so many of them. It's a very expensive mistake to get wrong. So what we don't want to do is give our recommendation to somebody and something go wrong, and all of a sudden people are on the hook for tens of thousands of pounds. With bridging, it's even more so, because short time frame, coronavirus, etc., etc., etc. The equation works out to a few months delay and a few months worth of additional bills. But Roma really came into their own during COVID. And one of the things that we really admired about what they did is they actually gave loan extensions for free loan extensions effectively, or at least without the additional interest, for all of their clients, LMPG and non-LMPG included. And they seem to thrive more so in times of trouble. At the minute, England and the rest of the UK seems to be looming from crisis to crisis, like Rome of the 3rd century. So what we've just left, what we're about to go into, I would not trust anyone more to take us through that than this man right here, Steve Smith of Roma Finance. So look, that's a lofty introduction for you.
You're paying him.
The plan is that you're going to reach those heights.
Yeah. Yeah, that's unfortunate.
So I hear rumours that you're going to drop rates down to 2% there, Steve.
Yeah, all kinds of things. You let me know when I can share my screen.
Lovely, thank you, Nick. Before we jump into this, I notice you're here tonight. Have you got anything you want to say before we get started?
No, not really. It's I'm looking forward to Steve's talk. I saw Rory there. He's into finance as well. Richard, I see a lot of members. So no, all I can say is that the next couple of, well, really the next sort of 6 to 12 months can be really difficult. We've got some big battles coming up on pricing. We've already started that discussion with some of the senior manufacturers that we deal with, and they're under so much pressure at the moment. And I can't really put into words the pressure they are under to get returns. And we're all in the same boat together. But it is hard out there. And I do understand that from people who've got 1 or 2 houses, people who've got 10, 15, 20 houses. But I always say in a recession, and I hate using that damn word, there are some always great opportunities for landlords. But I don't know how to put this politely, but you got some balls to stay in it and really stick with it, because when you come out of it, there's some fantastic opportunities for everybody, but you just got to stick together. You've got to work really hard, and you've got to work doubly hard for the same rewards you maybe got over the last 10 years, maybe 3 times. It's long hours, hard work. But as long as we stick together and there's people to help or guide us, I announced yesterday that I'd be stepping back into the social media to help people. I've said emails, I've banned emails in my office, that if somebody emails in and needs help, don't send an email back. You have to ring that member to help. because it's a lonely place out there, especially if you're on your own and you've got 1 or 2 properties and you think, God. So no emails, they will get a phone call directly from our office if they need help. So that's all I can say is that it's going to be tough out there, but we stick together, we'll come through this. That's it.
Lovely, thank you, Nick.
Right.
So, Steve, have you found that share screen button yet? It's the big green one at the bottom of your screen.
Absolutely. Can you all see that? It's just loading up on mine.
Fantastic, thank you. So
Cool.
just questions for tonight, guys, before we let Steve burst out of the gates like this wild stallion that I know he is. Questions, we have a chat box down at the bottom of the screen. If you're on mobile, I think it's still at the bottom of the screen, and you can type them in right here. Myself and Bav will ask these throughout the night if they're particularly pertinent to what Steve's saying, or if you're feeling very brave, what you can do is you can actually unmute yourself and jump in and put him on the spot.
And please do. Let's make it as interactive as we can. No problem at all with that. I'll answer anything you've got. If I can't, I'll take it away and come back to you.
Brilliant, thank you.
No problem. So, as you say, it's not the catchiest title in the world. The UK working through an economic disaster, but it's not all disastrous tonight. Hopefully, by the end of it, we can all have a little bit of glimmer of what the future can bring. And as Nicholas said, there is a lot of opportunity, even if we try not to use the word recession, but in economic troubles, there is always opportunities for us to actually do well, especially with property. So what I'm going to start off with is basically where we are, what's led up to it and where we are now, and hopefully where we can go after that. So if we sort of dive straight in, and as I say, at any point, just go through, stop where you want to, just give me a question, whatever you need to do really to sort of get to that point is absolutely fine with me. So if we start, so everything sadly starts with the USA, and the USA is a self-sufficient animal, which we are not. And so all globally traded commodities, especially oil, it is priced in dollars. So when the weak pound goes against a strong dollar, there's problems. Obviously, you add Russia, you add Iran, you add all kinds of things into that mix, and we've had problems. And we've obviously got an exacerbation of inflation, as anybody who reads a newspaper or listens to the news will tell you right now. Apparently 11.1% today it's gone up to. So we are still climbing rather than reducing. So, there are problems, there are issues in our UK economy. We're not alone. There are problems across the world in all economies, but we are particularly looking at UK today, and we are not self-sufficient as some of our competitors are, like the USA. We've obviously got a bit of a winter of discontent coming as well. You've seen all the strikes looming, some more coming our way as well. And this is because we've got the wages are not matching the inflation in essence. So we're looking at sort of a whole host. As you can see a few figures there. There was a lot of stats in this. I won't go through them. You can read it. You can have a copy of this anyway. But basically, we're looking at people are unhappy with their working environments. People are having to work harder, longer hours, lose some of their pensions, lose some of their benefits. And obviously, price of food, price of petrol, price of electric and gas is all going up. So there are certain problems, as you will see in the sectors, especially in the private sector at the moment. We will look at allegedly teachers, allegedly nurses are also going to look at going on strike. We've obviously had the obvious ones. If you roam around the country on trains like I do, it's been quite a problematic time, even on the underground as well in London. You'll all like that next picture. Obviously, our little intermittent trust government didn't help us at all. We had problems with what they did, and there's no way of sort of talking through that in any positive way. How they affected things just created a bigger problem. Basically they came in with the ex-chancellor, who didn't last very long. What they did was just cause a big problem to be an even bigger problem with their so-called tax cuts, etc. So if you look at the next one, the Trust government basically removed the additional rate of tax. We had that whole economic statement, and all it did was send everything into meltdown in the markets. And basically, the concept just didn't work at all. And unfortunately, what should have happened was really looking at tax cuts, those earning the least. A VAT cut would have been a good, strong business case that people were calling for. And then you've got the increase of wages for really lower income families. I think, most of us would want to support people working, and most of us would want to support if you're on a low income, we'd still like you to work, but support you to do that rather than lose your job or continue as we are. So we had a bit of a perfect storm, as my marketing manager deliberately did a lovely picture of a storm there. It was pretty much an absolute disaster, and Truss and Quarter didn't really help. And that's sort of where we came into. Now, fortunately, there's a lot more positives in this message that I'm giving to you tonight than just those first 6 slides. But we have to look at these to really see where we are. And obviously, we've now got increasing interest rates. So for any property owner, and I am one myself, you look at, it's not just mortgages, but term loans, everything is increasing. The Bank of England is trying to control inflation by increasing interest rates. Now, obviously, a few months ago, we're at 0.1%. We're now at 3%. Is it controlling inflation? It doesn't seem to be. So, it's obviously going to go up even higher. People are talking 5s and 6s, but probably limiting at that. And we're going on a bell curve. So it'll be 5 or 6, but it won't be 5 or 6 for very long, which is the positive. We're looking at basically, if you look at the interest rates going forward, 2, 3, 5, 10-year rates, which obviously our analysts do, it's already looking at sort of the 5 years are cheaper than the 2. So we're looking at trouble for sort of 6, 12, 18 months, and then they'll start decreasing again. What none of us can say, because none of us have a crystal ball, is where it'll actually end up. We can probably honestly say it's not going to end up at 0.1%, but it's probably likely to come down to that 2.5%, 3% that will become our norm. And I think we all have to get that into our heads. Now, for those as old as me, and there's probably very few of those on this call, but for those old as me, we've been through recessions before, we've been through big hikes in interest rates before. It's not the end of the world. We just have to get your head around it. And for those youngsters amongst us who this is the first time they've seen these kind of interest rates, and then you might have 1 property or 2 properties, it's hard. As Nicholas was saying at the start, there are lots of people you can talk to LMPG, have conversations with them, talk to us, have conversations with us. We can tell you about what's going on in the world and in the market at this moment in time, and it's not all doom and gloom. There are opportunities out there.
Steve, you mentioned the bell curve there of
yeah,
we're now at 3%, starting at 0.1, and we're going to hit a peak of 6%, go back down to whoever knows, but let's say 3% for argument's sake.
Yeah.
What kind of time scale are we talking about here of this 6% peak? How long are we going to be in the trenches with that?
Well, they all say different things. When I say it is basically you've got the UK government, you've got the Bank of England, you've got the IMF. So you look at it and you go, to be honest, people are saying we will probably hit it in the next 3 or 4 months. So early part of next year, so the end of the first quarter of next year, we're probably going to hit the peak. It's probably going to be there for about 6 months, depending on what happens, and then it'll slowly start coming down. The idea is that they don't want to sort of peak like a mountain, they want a curve, so they want it to come down so people get used to it again. So it's going to be a slow sort of incline and then a slow decline. So we're talking probably 12 to 18 months of pain between now 3% and 3% again. So 12 to 18 months. So there could be 5-6% interest rates for sort of 6 months.
Okay. And that's, by the way, everyone, I imagine that is based on what's currently happening. And one of the troubles with this kind of thing is that circumstances change very quickly, and therefore outcomes can change very quickly. So according to what's currently happening, the situation we're in right now, that's your prediction, is it?
Yeah. And that's from the data and analysts that we've got sort of in all the main banks and building sites of the country. So
Thank you.
That's where we get the information. Okay. And so the problem with the UK is that we don't manufacture very much anymore, which is a sad state of affairs, and we are very much a net importer. So if we've got a weak pound, it costs us more to import. And obviously, we've always started using attracting foreign investment. We've got a lot of houses, a lot of properties that are now owned from monies from America, China, was Russia for a time. That's obviously stopped for the obvious reasons, but we've had a lot of influx of foreign money, and that is actually foreign investment is important to us. And we've had a stable low inflation environment for such a long time that people looked at us, and we can't believe it now, but people thought how stable and brilliant our economy was in comparison to some of theirs. And now obviously that's taken a bit of a hit, and we have to accept that, you know, things have changed slightly. But again, in all of this, we're not alone. We are not alone at all. The whole world is having problems economically at the moment for a whole variety of reasons. I wanted to cover bonds slightly because when the value of the pound falls, confidence in the UK market also falls. And it did, obviously, exacerbated by the Truss interim government. The announcement of unfunded and sort of unsubstantiated tax cuts didn't help. It went into a bit of free fall, and the government issued new bonds, which we also call gilts. Now, so when the confidence was really low and the perceived risk was very high, which has calmed down a little bit already, by the way, you know, we're only sort of a month or two away from utter devastation that was going on in the markets. And actually, it's already come back. A lot of the interest rates, although the interest rates will continue, a lot of the gilt markets, a lot of the 5 to 10 year term money has gone back to what it was pre-Truss. So although not an ideal situation, it's a better situation than it was already 4 weeks ago. What we've also got now is the problem with inflation, how to control it. And obviously, all of us look at food prices and petrol prices and electric and gas prices and are concerned. And I think this really hits everybody in the property market, because obviously if you've got more than one house, more than one mortgage, more than one electric and gas bill, it obviously exacerbates the situation more. So it's really looking at how we can, and I'll come on to, I promise, some positives at the end of this slideshow, but we will look at, we've got to be reasonable and realistic about what the problems are. Now, an interest increase in mortgages is a problem, but equally we have hopefully people who rent, and therefore the rents will also go up in line. Now, it doesn't always work because you have rents for 6 months or whatever, but you can, at this moment in time, increase rent to overcome the mortgage cuts as well. So, you know, it swings around, right? It's not all on you as the owner of the property to just soak up all of that interest increases. You can go back to the people who are renting a property and increase those rents. Pension funds. The big problem with pension funds in this country is that they are massive and they have a lot of commercial properties behind them. I'll come on slightly to property and commercial, which is one of our big opportunities coming forward. But when a pension fund needs extra capital, they will probably start selling off stock, and that stock is generally large commercial premises. So there will be an influx in probably the next 3 to 6 months of commercial premises that will be lower in value than they're actually worth. And with permitted development rights rife now throughout the country, it's easier to change of use from commercial to residential. There's a real opportunity here for people to look at commercial buildings that can be easily transferred into co-living, a HMO, just a normal buy-to-let, and have a look at that. And that is a big opportunity that we're already seeing from a lot of our experienced developers. But I think there's a big market here that's untapped, and that market will get more and more exciting in the next sort of 6 to 12 months, because there'll be a lot of properties coming from these big pension funds where they just need to get rid of them, and they can have millions and millions and millions of pounds worth of commercial properties, and they will just sell them at rock bottom prices to get that cash in to give them liquidity in the markets which they need. So though this is one of the big opportunities that I want to talk about tonight, is basically commercial properties that can be readily made into residential semi-commercial use. And you can do that with bridges, you can do that with, you know, term loans, etc., to get real value for money in that sort of getting a property at a knockdown price. And that is important. So how do you relate all this to property? And that's probably what we're talking about today. And that's probably why you're all listening and interested today. I think falling currency obviously makes UK assets much cheaper to overseas investors. So we will get foreign investors coming back in, which we need in this country. And it is sort of, we expect demand to increase for UK property assets, but that UK property assets, foreign investors won't generally come in for commercial properties. They'll come in for newly built blocks of flats. They will come in for, you know, the very high end properties in London and the Southeast. There are a lot of properties out there that you can still get at auction that can just have a little bit of 20, 30 grand's worth of work on to get a new kitchen, new bathroom, and really turn on that desirability. And if you buy in the right areas, these property prices are going to go down, which I'll talk about slightly. We are looking at that, but in certain areas, they won't go down by much. And we've had such an increase over the last 5 to 10 years that if you look at a property like, for example, where I live in Gloucestershire, it's a 3-bed that was extended. We bought it probably 15 years ago. It's probably worth double that now. We have done some work on it. We have maintained it. But in what other world could you double your money in sort of 10 years? And that's what we've done with property. And property will always have that effect. Even if we're going to go through a bit of a crisis, a bit of a problem, even the R word, the recession, property prices are still way, way above what they were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, in some areas 1 year ago, 2 years ago. And property prices were increasing up until 2 months ago across the board in England, Wales and Scotland.
And Steve, do you have any insight on, if we're talking some property prices are going to go down and that's going to be presumably affected regionally, which regions we're talking about, and is that what's the kind of delay on recovery of those prices?
Okay, so yeah, we have got some stats on this. The worst case scenario people are talking now is 15%, and that 15% occurs in the very, very high end of London. So we're
15% is the figure I keep hearing, but there's always an assumption that that's every property in the UK is going down 15%.
Which isn't accurate according to Nationwide and Halifax when they do their sort of area by area. They're looking at 15% worst case in London at the top end. So if you're buying a flat for £1 million, you're probably going to get 15% off that, you know, if you're trying to sell it in the next 6 months. However, if you're buying a 3-bed semi-detached in Bolton, for example, it's not going to go down 15%. It might go down 5%. But because of where it is and how much the value of that property is, there'll still be a real big market for those kinds of properties. And it's all about finding the right properties in the right area. I would say personally, know your area. If you're going to buy properties, know it. Don't buy it, you know, in an area you know nothing about. It sounds great if, you know, you live in the south, you can get a cheap house in, you know, Grimsby, but if you don't know Grimsby, you might be on the wrong side of Grimsby. It might be, you know, completely different. Whereas if you live in Grimsby, don't go and buy a house in London, you know, because you won't know it. So there's a lot to be said for that, and there's a lot to be said for knowing the areas, knowing your estate agents, finding out where the up and coming areas are, because there are various, you know, areas within every town and city that have the areas that are desirable. And sometimes it's always best to get the worst house on the most desirable street and do it up. And that's where you make your money and you make your, and all of these sort of, you know, worst case scenarios of 15% doom and gloom, you can increase, and we see it every day at Roma, you can increase the property value of your house by 25, 30% by doing very little work. So it's, you know, it's all, it sells newspapers, sends a 15%, you know, decrease on every property in the UK. That will not happen. There are certain places where it could happen, and already the Halifax is saying it's probably more like 10, and already the Nationwide is saying in some areas it'd be 5. So it's a crystal ball. Nobody's got one, but I say worst case scenario is 15%, but they are very specific, expensive properties in the southeast.
And in terms of those prices recovering?
The recovery is going to be in line with the interest rates, is what basically the general consensus of opinion is. So it's going to be, it's not getting 15% maximum for a year. It'll start coming back after that. So we're not talking a very long 2, 3, 4 year problem here. We're already seeing that. We will see house prices move back up as interest rates go back down. In essence, it'll be very much a direct correlation with that.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. So as I mentioned, commercial property is less certain, and we are seeing valuers, we see valuations every day, and we do commercial as well as residential, semi-commercial, and we see a lot of valuations. Valuations are coming in generally lower than what people think on commercial properties in the main. It's not all commercial properties, but retail is being affected, and office blocks is being affected because obviously before all this, we had COVID, people started doing this, video calls instead of going around and having a coffee or a beer with people. And that's obviously, people don't need so many office spaces anymore. However, warehousing is really needed. And there's certain, you know, places in commercial where it's still really important to have. But commercial in general is going to be the worst affected by all of these prices. So whereas residential, you buy a decent sized, decent priced residential property, do it up in the right area, the effects will be fairly minimal, even in this recession that's looming. So it's just, you probably need to do a little bit more homework. I would say, have conversations with estate agents, have conversations with LMPG specialists, have conversations with banks, building societies about areas, property prices, get your comparisons, which can be easily done online now as well. But really do your homework before investing, but don't be put off by it. There's going to be some bargains out there. Even on the residential property, there'll be some bargains as certain people, for whatever reason, will decide that they want to get rid of some of their properties. I would say, if you're a property investor, you've seen this come and go, you've seen recessions come and go, and you've probably got many, many properties. So you're probably actually more protected, even though you've got more properties. I feel for people who've just bought their first buy-to-let, you know, and they might be hit with a mortgage increase already in the rates. I feel for that kind of person, but it's just about, you know, making sure that you've got, if you're going to go into the market again, buy maybe a smaller property that's got the ability to be done up, the ability to do up in sort of with fairly low-key things that can be done quite quickly, and you get it back on the market and rent it out. There's a big rental markets out there. There are still too few houses and too many people in Britain. So property is still the way to go to make money and to actually do well. And property is not for 6 months or 12 months. You can make money on property for the next 10, 15, 20, 25 years. So when you look at obviously the mortgages and the term loans, you have got stress test problems, you have got affordability problems. With bridging, obviously, you don't have that, because, you know, we look at what the exit is and sort of, you know, basically what, you know, the problem is you will have an exit at some point, which could be either a term loan or a mortgage. So you have to be aware of that fact as well. So when you take a bridge, get your exit absolutely spot on, because those exits that are there now may not be there in 12 months' time when that bridge is ending. We've seen some lenders pull out, we've seen some lenders change their LTVs and lower their LTVs. We're not seeing that across the market. We're seeing some of that happen, but we have still got, and we obviously do bridges every day. We've got literally thousands of them, and we see the exits are still in place. Right now, there are many, many exits for our bridges, and we look at, just to give you some context of what's going on at the moment, if you look at when redemptions come in from a bridge, and our average is 11 months, for whatever reason, that's the average that we have on a bridge. And at the moment, 50% of those bridges are being absolutely paid off on time to the day. 25%, near as damn it, are being paid off early, and 25% require some kind of extension because they might have a problem selling the property, or looking at sort of, you know, getting a term loan again.
What kind of length of extension are we talking there?
3 months is the average. So it's
Okay.
not an extension for a huge amount. We don't change the rate for that either. So, but we're looking at the market, and that's actually really strong. So we're looking at basically 75% of our bridges now, even in this situation, are paying us off earlier on time in full. So they have got their exits all planned. The 25%, which is far, far below the average at the moment, because the average is 40, but the 25%, it's generally the sales. And it's the sales that have actually declined a little bit, for the obvious reasons that people don't necessarily want to buy them right now.
I was just going to ask you, do you know what's happening to these bridges at the end of the terms?
So again, choose your lender wisely. You know that we were very, very good during COVID, and we're going to be very good with people because we like repeat business. Almost 50% of our business is repeat, so we look after our customers, and that's very important. As Nicholas was saying at the start, you need to look after the people because we're in trouble at this moment in time. When you're in trouble, look after each other and we'll all get through it. And that's what we want to do. So if you choose your bridge wisely, your bridger wisely, lots and lots of bridging companies like us will go, right, you can have 3 months or 6 months extension to sort yourself out, but have the conversations. If you're getting to the end of a bridge, don't put your head in the sand. If your exit isn't happening because, I don't know, one of you were going to go with a term loan, it's been pulled at the last minute, just talk to our customer services team. It's absolutely fine. We can actually talk to, you know, your borrowers about, well, actually, have you looked at these people? these exit sort of, 25% of all of our business. So they're definitely open for business and work. There are new people in the marketplace. Virgin Money, for example, are doing a lot of our exits now where they never did 6 months ago. So these people are out there looking at this. So, there are always other people coming to play if some people close off. There's still a lot of money in the market. It just is more expensive. But there is not short of money at all, or markets at all at the moment. It's just the money is more expensive, and it will be for the next time.
Okay.
You come up with some great statistics about percentage of falls, etc. I was watching something on YouTube yesterday where they were saying that the first-time buyers and people wanting to get into the market, and they're saying this is a great opportunity for landlords because there's a shortage of houses. The landlords are going to be picking up people moving out of home to buy their first house. They've changed. Now they're looking back into rented, which is also now pushing the rents up.
Yeah. And that is a big market. So for your big
enormous
landlords,
I was watching.
Yeah.
Have you got statistics on how many first-time buyers won't come into the market?
I don't, because we don't really look at those first-time buyers as more, we don't do mortgages, but we look at first-time bridges, people who come for their first sort of bridge. That's their first, probably not their home necessarily, but it's their first buy-to-let, and that has decreased. We've seen that, the first times that might be, it might be they're a builder and they've done it for 400 people, but they want to do it for their first time themselves. We've seen that slow down, and we're seeing a lot more property networks have sort of far more property developers come in, and they're picking up these sort of one-offs, whereas we used to see auctions go and look at sort of, auction properties would go almost twice the value of what they were being started off at, whereas now they're going for pretty much the value of what they are going in for. So in some ways, the auctions can be a really good place to start learning your trade and having a look at what is out there. Because 12 months ago, if somebody said to me, Steve, I'm going to go to an auction, I want 120 grand. And I'll say, well, how much are you going to bid? And it's 120 grand. It's like, you're never going to get it, because that will probably end up being 200 grand when it's sold. Now, last week, there was an auction where the guy said 120, he got it for 118. Now, 12 months ago, that would never have happened. So,
yeah, one of the things we're not picking up, we're not hearing, and again, it's just from our members, I don't hear about people having problems renting out houses. There's normally 2 or 3 people going for the same house. Is that the same across the board at the moment? In your experience, I've got no statistics. I'm wrapped up inside my office.
Yeah, we're not seeing any problems of rental income. No property investors coming to us saying I can't rent my properties. Everybody that you put a rental out, and you will get that rental price, and you'll have 3-4 people come in wanting to pay that price. There's no shortage of that rental market. Now, it could be because we don't know the full extent that some people might be actually selling their properties that they live in and going to rent. We're not seeing that yet. It's too soon to see that kind of stat, but we're not seeing any problems in the rental market whatsoever. And people are expecting increases in rents because they can see the mortgage rates.
The only reason I'm asking these questions is people that are going to watch this later and who are watching it now.
Well, yeah, I'm glad that you've asked, actually, Nick, because I've just had a private message come through asking a question, which is, a landlord concerned about rental demand and how that's going to fare throughout the recession. I think you've kind of just answered it, that's not the issue here.
See, I just think that inflation's gone out of control, interest rates have gone up, and everybody's starting to panic.
Yeah,
and trust me, I'm in the same boat. Yeah, I've got rented houses, yes, in a private area. So yeah, it is concerning, and I haven't got a crystal ball. I wish I knew what was going to happen.
And none of us have. We can only go on, we look at, you can imagine the analysts in the funders, and they're all trying to find out what's going on to give us an idea. And we just take the average of all of those analysts to see sort of where we can get a medium. And we've been through this before. We've been going 15 years. We've seen it in previous times. We saw it in COVID. All I would say is it's a lot about communication. If you feel you're in trouble, if you feel you have a problem, whether it's in a bridge or with a loan or a mortgage, talk to the people around you and talk to the people that can help you. Because actually, you know, I spoke to a guy yesterday, yesterday morning actually, at a property sort of networking event, and he thought he had a real problem, and all he needed was another month, you know, to get his sale done, because he had to get it sold. It's a nothing. That's not a problem to us. That's not a. It's like, okay, of course you can have it. There's no extra fees. It's just 1 more month. You can do it, and you've actually got. The first sale fell through because they couldn't get the mortgage, or they didn't want the mortgage because it had probably gone up. I get that, but they've got another one within 4 weeks. So
But you hear from bridging companies that if you're late or you don't complete on the date that you've said, there is almighty arrangement fees and penalties. Is that not the same with you?
no, there are obviously, or depending on, you know, if you suddenly want 12 months more and you've done nothing to a property, it's different. But there are different types of bridging companies out there, and there are certain bridging companies that are quite happy to, if you go a day over, you're going to pay through the roof for it.
Yeah.
And there are certain bridging companies like ourselves and others, don't get me wrong, there are plenty of others as well, where we want to work with that borrower and do their second, third, 14th, 25th property. If I'm going to absolutely bite his hand off every time he goes one day over for something, he's never going to come back to me.
No. But we're talking about the person that's just done maybe one, or he's on his first one. He's thinking she's thinking that they're going to sell it complete it within 11 months, and they just need another month.
Yeah. It's have a conversation.
It's really horrendous penalty fees to pay.
Yeah, it's a really easy thing to have that conversation, to go, you know what, it's another month, we'll give you another month, you will pay that monthly interest.
Of course, yes, yeah.
But, you know, worst case scenario, we might turn around and go, I'll tell you what, we'll give you 3 months, but there might be this charge and you can have the same interest rate. Or it could be, you know what, it will slightly increase interest rate, well, there'll be no charge. But we're not talking end game disaster. We're not talking we're going to suddenly put 5% penalty interest on you, or a huge thousands of pounds. It's about working with people to make sure that the next time they go, you know what, Roma were friendly, they understood, I made a bit, they made a bit, and we'll carry on with the next one.
Good. Okay.
So, Steve, I'm enjoying this because you're stumbling into all of the questions that I'm being asked. So, the next one, which I feared would be a digression, is are bridging loans extended on the same terms and rates, or is there a penalty and financial consequence on top of the rate? So, I'm going to rephrase this ever so slightly to make it a new question, which is, at Roma, is there a hard and fast rule of saying, well, 1 month is okay, but 3 months, we're going to have to start charging you this? Is it case by case? I mean, what's the playbook there?
It is case by case, and it is borrower, and it depends what the situation is. As you say, through COVID, it was nobody's fault, so we just did a carpet blanket. Everybody can have up to 12 months on the same interest rate. So it was a different world because we're in a different place. The simple rule, I suppose, is if somebody wants to go over, we will give them 3 months and charge a fee, a flat fee, 3 months. And that is very reasonable in the marketplace. We're not going to do any massive penalised interest on you. What we really appreciate is forewarning. So, you know, if you talk to us 3 months before, 2 months before, 1 month before, we can make some arrangement. If you come to us on the day and you promise you're going to pay and then you don't, it's a different world, because conversation. But so there's no hard and fast rule, but generally we're very flexible, we're very fair. I say almost half of our business is now repeat business, and that's the way we want to keep it. And we probably do well in situations that are tough because we are people you can talk to.
Okay, brilliant. So it's just about not putting you on your back foot, really.
Yeah, it's about communication. Just talk to us, and you know, we know that some people are going to not be able to get mortgages, not be able to get term loans because they've been dropped, and we know that some people need more time to sell their properties because people will not be buying them because they'll see the interest rates and say it's not the right time. So we understand that. You know, we see what's going on, and we can relate to that.
Brilliant, thank you.
No problem. So property prices, we sort of mentioned, the worst case is 15% in the higher southeast, really expensive market. So your high-end flats that are eye-watering price anyway, at 15%, you know, it could be that you've got and when you look at that logically, if that's £1 million flat and you're going to sell it for 850 in a crisis, it doesn't sound quite as bad as 15%. However, if you're living in a house that's 120 grand and in a crisis you're going to get 92, it's not the end of the world in that scheme of things. So it depends how much you've already increased the value of that property. And I get that it's completely different. If you've had a house for 20 years, you've made a lot of money and a lot of profit in there already. If you've just bought one 6 months ago, it is more difficult, and we get that as well. But it's just all about, looking at it logically and seeing where we are. So the buy-to-let market, which a lot of people here will be in, the problem that we had is that fixed rates are difficult now, and they're difficult for the simple thing that nobody could really anticipate the interest rate rise is going up so quickly and so often. So if you are, and we have 9 funding lines, for example, that support us as well as our own money, and we have banks and building societies from the UK that have them, and they would give us, they go, yes, you can have a fixed rate, but then a month later they'd say you can't, or change that fixed rate. So it just became, you can't really do it. So it's a very difficult thing. So at the moment, you've got to look at what the buy-to-let market is. And there are some fixed rates out there, but they're generally quite high because people are nervous, especially if it's like a 1 year or 2 year fixed. So you've got to be careful about that. And that is just a fact of life. As I said at the very start, we've got a bell curve coming. It's going to be for a year and a half, and it'll start going down again. When you start seeing the fixed rates lower in their 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 year forecasts, you know that we're coming out of this situation, because the money markets are saying, actually, in 5 years, it'll be fine. Base rate will be right back down again. We can now look at a 4% fixed rate or whatever, as opposed to 6s and 7s that are looking at the moment. So I wouldn't say jump into a 5 year or a 10 year fixed rate right now. If they offer you, I would say, be careful. We're going to go up, but then we are going to come down again fairly soon. So fixed rates, I'd stay away from anything on a 3 year plus. If you want to do it for a year or 2 years, fair enough. Nobody can see that crystal ball, but I wouldn't go into a 5 or a 10 year fixed right now, because although we're seeing increases, they will come down as rapidly as they've gone up.
Quick question, Steve. What would you say is a good LTV ratio when it comes to rates?
So for property development, sort of in sort of residential markets, 75% is the normal, really, for us in a bridge. So for a bridge, you should expect 75%. Obviously, you don't have to put 25% deposit monies in. It could be a charge on another property or a second charge on another property, and you don't have to necessarily have the cash in your hand to do that. But in general, in bridging terms, 75% is normal in a residential property LTV.
Okay.
So we do a lot of ground up development as well. And we've done a lot of ground up development in the last 2-3 years. It's been really successful. And we do anything from £100,000 to 3 million. So we look at first time people doing, people might do a refurb, they might do a few refurbs, now they want to do a ground up. Now, all I would say is that's still very, very viable. There are a huge shortage of family homes, in Britain, and people building them are going to do very well. All I would say is that GDVs have fallen, especially in the commercial sector, and the GDV is basically what you expect the price to be, the value of that property when you built it. So that's all we're talking about. So if I'm going to buy a field with planning, going to build 2 houses on it, and I think they're going to be worth £500,000 each because I'm doing them as 4-bed detached houses or whatever, don't be surprised if value comes back right now in the middle of this situation, goes, you're probably only going to get 450 for that. They don't really know, because they haven't seen what you're going to finish up as, and we don't know that in 12 months where the situation is going to be, but they are being a little bit, not hugely, but a little bit conservative on GDVs, and you've got to expect that now. Especially, this is only for the people that want to do ground up developments. That might not be the marketplace that I'm talking to tonight, but some people do. It also affects, we do a lot of commercial to resi, so pubs, hotels, restaurants that people will buy, they've closed down, and make them into flats or co-living, which is the new buzzword that I'm hearing a lot of. And that is, popular in certain areas, especially if you've got a university or sort of, in an area, that's going to be the next big thing. So people are telling me, and so we've got a lot of investors that are building them at the moment. And things like that, when you hear co-living, which means nothing to me because I'm very old, but for you coming out as a student and your first house, you're not going to buy your first house, are you? Probably, but you might be able to go and rent with 3 other professionals who are in their first place. And the big things there are parking spaces and Wi-Fi. That's what people want. And if you've got really good Wi-Fi and a parking space, and you've got, you can share your bills, it's working very well in certain areas, especially on the South Coast. Places like Brighton, Portsmouth, Bournemouth, places like this are doing very well in co-living. Used to be HMOs, sort of probably 2 years ago was the big buzzword. It's now probably co-living. So think about that when you're looking at houses and doing sort of renovations. And we can help you with those. We do generally sort of, 70% purchase. And then, you can do 100% of the refurb works as well. So things like that really do matter when you're looking at what the new trends are and what's going on. But look at this slide, you would say it's actually, people will say it's a good time to start looking at the market because there will be some cheap ones out there. Residential properties, you might even find sites that have been started, but they're not finished. Some, for whatever reason, they've stopped completely, the funding's been pulled or whatever. They're just called development exit schemes. Same thing, but it just means that we will quite happily take something on at a part-way stage. So don't be scared that there's, something built like that we can see that's half built. We can look at that and still finish that project off. And in some ways it's easier because a lot of the hard work's been done. So if you can look at a half-built site, think about it, because a lot of that, you could get it for a song and you could actually complete it cheaper than it would have been done initially. And actually then you can go on and it's done a lot quicker because you've probably got 6 months rather than 18 months of work to do. Our products, I mean, to be fair, I'll briefly mention them, but please, I've got my contact details on this, so please talk to me. I've got BDMs all over the country in various areas. So just, but if you need anything, you can always email or phone me and I will talk you through it quite happily. As you've probably gathered, I like to talk, and basically we'll talk about this thing, and then one of my BDMs will certainly do all the paperwork to help you out. We do all kinds of bridging finance, residential, semi-commercial, commercial. We do auction finance, which just means we do it very quickly. We do refurbishment, and we do refurbishments on all of the above, resi, semi-commercial and commercial. We do ground up development, and we also have a buy-to-let portfolio package as well. But if you want to talk about bridging or development or anything, it's not for this forum, but certainly take my details and we can talk about it separately.
Potentially relevant at this point, I've got a question regarding buy to let. Do you know how hard it is at the minute to get finance with a view of giving your property to a company such as Serco for a 5-year lease?
It is more difficult. There's no getting away from that. It is possible. There's still people out there that do that, but it is more difficult. People like the term loans to have a basic sort of 6 months AST situation. That is the general norm, and that's the norm for most sort of bridging companies like ourselves. But there are people out there that just deal in term loans full stop, that will do all kinds of things for like 5 years, 10 years, 3 years, all of that. And I've got a list. I don't know them because we don't do that. But if anybody wants them, email me. I can give you a list of people who do that.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. And Roma Flow is just a simple marketing slogan, to be honest, that we use, but it just means it's a very quick, for your auction purchase, or if you need to buy something quickly, it is really a simple, easy solution. We need very little. A lot of it is done with sort of apps and electronically and computers. And so basically it's very light touch. And 80% of all those cases, which is the main thing to mention, especially when you're talking about auctions, 80% of all those cases that go through Roma Flow are paid out and completed within basically 28 days. So that's, in this world, because we came from a situation in bridging where we did auction finance, 28 days to us is the norm for a simple bridge. That's not for the ground up developments. That does take longer because there's more due diligence. But for your sort of quick refurbs, really simple refurbs up to 20% of the value of the property. So if you buy a property for 200 grand, you're going to do up to 40 grand's worth of works, put in a new kitchen, a new bathroom, whatever. We can class that as Roma Flow, and we can do that in 4 weeks. So again, that's important. And very little work. You need to give very little information. It's an application form and sign an AIP. The rest is basically done electronically.
And just to clarify here, Steve, because there's something, I don't know what it is, but it frustrates me with Roma Flow, is it seems like it's an add-on. This isn't an add-on, is it? This is the part of the usual process.
It's part of the usual process. This is our normal process now for a simple bridge. So we call it Roma Flow. It's just, but we have two types without boring you completely about our situation at head office. You either have a Roma Flow product, which is a simple bridge, which is a bullet loan that you pay out, or you have a sort of refurbishment or structured development where there are sort of payments that go on afterwards. And it's just in two different ways. And the Roma Flows are very simple, very light touch. And as you'd expect, when you've got a big development scheme, you have more information.
Okay, thank you.
I wanted to bring in the below market value, because I do think that in the current situation that we're going to go into, or we are in at the moment, I think you will be able to get below market value properties. There's no question. So you will look at sort of, you might be able to a value will say it's worth 200 grand, but for whatever reason, you might be able to pick it up for 160, 170. I would say grasp it. We have a product which I can go through completely and talk about if you've got any individual ways, but we can give you basically, in essence, up to 90% of that purchase price. So as you can see, loan to purchase, which is what you're purchasing it for, as long as it's not more than 70% of the actual value of the property. So it's a maths equation that can do your head in, because I know Anthony was saying earlier on, he said, maths equation, this is time of night, don't want to know. But basically, if you look at, we can basically give you money against what you're purchasing it for, which means you're paying less of a deposit. In essence, that is all it is. It's a very long-winded way of doing it and explaining it, but basically we can use your purchase price rather than your actual value. And so if you're buying it for less than the actual value, you're getting a good deal. Not many people are doing.
Steve, is there a minimum value on that?
So no, the minimum value for all of our stuff is about 50,000, to be fair, Derek.
Thanks, man.
No worries. And on that, because it is very new, we're trialing it. So it is only in England and Wales at the moment. And it is in Scotland if we do a comfort charge as well. And basically, it's only up to 500k. We're going to see how it works. If it works very well, we'll open it up all throughout for up to 3 million. We're just going to see how that goes. We're not sure of how it's going to go. It's a new product for us, but I think in the current climate, I think it's probably a good bet if you start looking at auction prices and just see if you can get, if you can pay 10% deposit rather than 25, why wouldn't you? In essence, keep your cash in your pocket.
And when Steve says this is exclusive to LMPG. We are part of that test group rather than being outside it.
Yeah. So please go through the LMPG and we know you're from LMPG to get that. Now, as I said, there was a glimmer of hope in all of this when I started this wonderfully titled seminar. We have had our record month for new business and for redemptions in October. And it's important, as I said, in bridging, it's great to get new business, but it's also great to get the redemptions. And we've done both. November, we've already seen will eclipse everything completely. So we are in a position where our two best ever months in the history of 15 years of Roma will be these 2 months. So when everybody's telling us it's the worst time ever, actually, bridging and development is doing really well in the UK at the moment. And it is a bright spot. There is a lot of bridging and development monies out there, I would say, and it's not just about Roma. Obviously, we are, we want you to use us, but there are other good bridging and development companies out there. Be careful, do your homework, have a look at them. Some are better than others. Some will look after their borrowers better than others. But property is still a very strong option. It really is. And making money from property in the UK, even now, is still a sustainable, achievable prospect that thousands and thousands of us will do. There are property networks and clubs up and down the country that are still getting more and more people attending them, even in these troubled times, because property will in essence, increase in value over a period of time. Yes, we might be in 6 months, 12 months where it might slightly decrease in value, but over 5, 10, 15, 25 years, it is one of the safest ways of making money. And, you know, we are in a small island with not enough houses and not enough properties and too many people wanting to live here. And therefore, it is a really good, viable option for all of us to look at. I think, finally, that is probably everything I had to say. If you've got any questions, by all
It's
means.
not quite everything you've got to say, because there's a lot of questions that I've got to read out. And I've noticed that Nick has unmuted himself as well. So you're going to be going for a long time yet, Steve.
That's okay.
Yeah, absolutely, because I got a question. I was watching a video of a big national investment company, and they haven't got a big office here. One of the biggest investment companies in the world. They've just opened a big office in central Canary Wharf. And they've said the reason why they've come into this country is, one, because of our lawmaking culture, and also that the culture of the UK population is intelligence of how good we are, of the entrepreneur of our country. And I was really quite humbled by that. And Anthony's looking at me going,
I'm not sure.
it was honestly a great video.
I think it's very true. I think, you know, and, you know, we have got a good environment. It is a safe environment still as well, you know, and that's important, especially to foreign investors coming to this country, because they could be coming from places that it isn't so safe. Their money isn't so safe, you know, in their properties or their banks.
No, I think the making money out of properties is a great way of making money.
Yeah.
So I'll shut up.
Agree.
I'm talking for England on this. So I'll
Well, I was wondering, Nick, if you were going to start.
Oh, right, I'll mute myself.
So yeah, I've got a couple of questions, but no, thank you so much for your insight today, Steve. Salim's asked, what are your costs? This is regarding Roma's bridging packages, presumably. So
a bridge in general, whether it's us or anybody, the costs are basically that there's an arrangement fee, which obviously through LMPG is reduced. So it's 1.25% as opposed to normal 2%. So it does make a difference. So if you think about how big a loan could be. And then there's an interest rate per month. So that could be 0.75% per month. So again, if you have a bridge for less amount of months, it's cheaper. And on a normal bridge, we would never do an exit fee. So there's no exit fees involved. But on a ground up development, there may be a month's exit fee. And that is different from funder to funder, but for us, that's fine. Other fees are basically, you have a valuation fee. It might be an AVM, a very simple one that we can do, on a computer, in which case it's 30 quid, or it could be, if it's a full-on ground-up development needing a QS, it could be £1,500. You just never know. But there's a valuation fee because we need that in order to prove that the GDV is correct and the amount of money that you're going to borrow is correct. And there is a legal fee, because obviously we have to have it all done through legal fees. And there you are. That's the fee involved. I mean, on anything, please do, if you wanted an example, I can do you a fake agreement in principle, which gives you all breakdown. That's absolutely fine. Please just email me. You've got my email address on the screen. Just pop me an email. I can give you a full-on agreement in principle on a fake property, if you like, with certain types of amounts, and it gives you a list. But basically, you've got an arrangement fee, which is cheaper through the LMPG. You have an interest rate per month, so the quicker you do the bridge, the cheaper it is, and you have a valuation and a legal fee.
I think that fake agreement in principle is a good idea, and if I was a member interested in this, I'd take Steve up on that. I'm not going to ask for it myself to put it on the internet or on Facebook or anything, because I think without the context, it's going to be more of a hindrance than a help. So I'll leave that for the members to get in contact with you. Tina's asked, does your company do bridge to let?
We do. You can a lot of companies have now a bridge where you can have a bridge, do up your apartment or house, and then put it onto a term loan. So we do that. It goes from a bridge. You do your work. So say you do 70% to buy it, or 75%, because there's a very small amount of refurb work to do. You do that, and then you can get the uplift in value. So a valuer would go in again and say, okay, you've done that work, you bought it for 120, you've done 20 grand's worth of work, it's now actually worth 160. We would then give you 75% on the term loan of that enhanced value. So you can actually have some more money, which could be a deposit for your next property or whatever. But we do that.
Okay. Brilliant, thank you. Steve, you mentioned earlier on, you said that I don't like doing maths because it's late at night. I'm going to let you into a little secret. I don't like doing maths ever. It doesn't matter what time of night it is. Yeah. That being said, I know that this is a numbers game, and we've got a few finance related questions here. So please look, this is over to you. Martin said, one of my mortgages has come off the 2-year fixed and has risen from £262 per month to £560 per month. Ouch. In that situation, would you recommend getting a 5-year product switch to £429 per month, or ride it out and see what happens on the variable?
It's a risk either way. Personally, with what everybody's saying in the marketplace, we're not going to have the increase of interest rates for 5 years. So I think if you can afford to, it is going to go up, the variable rate. It will go up again, there's no question, but it will come down considerably before that 5 years is up. So I think probably do a little maths equation of what it costs for you over 5 years compared to if you sort of went up for a year and then down again. I think I would do that. I think on that one, I would probably ride it out a little bit for 5 years. But it's from what everybody's saying, it's going to come down by 2 years time, it'll start coming down again. Definitely 18 months, probably. So
presumably, hidden somewhere in that maths equation, which I'm not going to pretend that I would know how to do, there would be a breaking point, right? Of if interest rates are this high, 6% for this long, then it's going to cost me that much. If we're looking at anything above 2 years, then in your opinion, Steve, that's really where it's.
But it is going to be, it could be 12 months of more pain. That's the thing. It could go up. It is going to go up again. It's not going to stop at this rate. It's still going to go up.
Oh, sure.
Inflation. Yeah. So, but it's not going to stay high for that long. And I think 5 years is quite nervy because all the sort of factors are telling us that in 5 years' time, we'll be back down to, probably where we are now, in all essence.
We've got another one here. Sean said, I've got 2 interest-only mortgages with 3 years to go, looking at refinancing, but should he hold back for now?
Yes.
Yeah, so 3 years and on the current rates.
Yeah.
Not a problem. Okay, brilliant. How many lenders in buy-to-let and HMO have you got access to at Roma?
So how many lenders? So we are a lender. For our we do HMOs, we do buy-to-lets, we have our own products for that. So it's our money, it's our product, we are the lender. Obviously there are probably 30, 40, 50 lenders that also do that kind of thing in the UK. But for us, it's our money, it's our lending. So, we provide that. We've got 9 funding lines. So that's apart from our own money. So we've got a lot of money to play with, but any term loan is from ourselves. So it's a Roma product.
Okay, thank you. Rogers asked, with a bit of a chip on his shoulder, might I add, why would a lender turn down an application for a mortgage for a company-owned portfolio because there are 4 or more directors? In this case, all of the directors are family members. So in your experience, have you seen companies with 4 or more directors having a worse time at getting funding?
No, not. It must be a specific funder. For example, if we don't do mortgages, we do bridges, but if somebody came with 4 or 12 directors, we would just look at who the shareholders are, and if 4 of the directors had more shareholders than others, we'd only want to talk to those 4. So it doesn't matter for us how many people there are, but that's for a bridge. For certain mortgage companies, I don't know why it would matter personally, but I couldn't answer that. We wouldn't care personally whether there were 2, 3, 12, but I don't know why another mortgage company would have a problem with that.
Okay, well, I've got kind of a Cluedo hint here. In that Derek has jumped in the chat. Super Derek here. Roger, I believe that they need clarity on who owns the property and who they need to chase should they need to repossess. which
Yeah.
kind of makes sense, I guess.
Yeah.
Logical. Ash has asked, thanks guys, just received a significant down valuation from Fleet Mortgages after Rick's valuation at 40% plus. Is this now typical in the industry?
I wouldn't say it's typical. We see a lot of valuations. I see a lot of valuations every day. As I say, the big drops at the moment seem to be in commercial, specifically sort of offices and retail. On your standard sort of residential stuff, we're not really seeing any kind of drop at the moment across the board, and that's in England, Scotland and Wales and all areas. As I say, the big drop in residential, should it happen, will be in the high-end stuff in London, the really expensive apartments.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. Roger's back. Here we go. He's got an excuse not to lend. Company owns the property, not the individuals. Now, if I were in the finance game, which I'm not, and I'm going to preface this with, this is not financial advice, I have no idea what I'm talking about. But if I didn't want to lend any money, I wouldn't necessarily reject it. I would whack my rates up so that if they were to go with me, it cost them an arm and a leg. Now, is that the case?
I think there probably are some funders out there that depend on their funding lines. I mean, people can be funded these days from foreign investments. That's probably dried up. So it could be that some funders simply don't have the funds or simply don't want to lend right now, and they could be thinking of reasons not to do it. But it seems you might as well just be honest and say. But there's a lot of money out there. At the moment, the problem that I'm seeing is not that funders don't have money. There's a lot of money. It's just how much it's going to cost you to borrow that money.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. He's going to look elsewhere. We got to a conclusion. So I don't have any more questions in the chat, but before I let you go, Steve, I'm going to chuck it over to Bav. And Bav, I want you to give Steve your most difficult pre-written question. We're going to make a feature of this. Bhavesh's most difficult question of the night. Come on, let's go.
To be honest, Steve kind of covered the reason I haven't been asking the question is because he's covered majority of it. So I have one question left, which is kind of off topic. It goes back to the topic of bonds and stuff.
Okay.
But with the recent circumstances and everything that's happened, the government's had to issue more bonds out. So does that affect the yield in any way? I'm assuming because an influx of bonds would eventually affect the yield.
Yeah, in essence, it does. The more bonds you give, the less value they are. In essence, that's basically how it works. So if they keep printing and keep printing and keep printing, they become less valuable. So that's how it works. And unfortunately, that sort of hit us after the whole trust sort of announcement. It's calmed down a lot already, and I think that's important to know. But yeah, I would say, that fiscal statement wasn't the wisest thing that's come out of Britain.
Okay. Okay, a very well phrased that, Steve. Look, thank you so much for your time tonight, and members, thank you for joining us. Steve is available. You had his contact information there, but you can also find Roma Finance on the LMPG website. Now, one thing that I've mentioned to Steve before this during the test is that there is a budget tomorrow, right?
There is an autumn announcement, yes.
So the autumn announcement that's coming out tomorrow, Roma will be doing, and they do this for each government intervention that comes in, I guess, kind of a breakdown, a digest. You get these from a lot of the finance providers. So I've asked Steve to share that with us, and we'll kind of add that as an addendum to tonight's presentation. The presentation, before anyone asks, has been recorded, will be uploaded to YouTube in the coming days. But no, thank you so much, Steve, for tonight. It's been very enlightening.
And thank you, Steve, as well. Thank you.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
My watch just said you're welcome. So yeah, thank you. Thank you, Apple, as well. Next week, we've got a completely different set of guests, in that we've got a brand new prop tech firm known as Help Me Fix joining. So the founder of Help Me Fix, Etan Basil, we spoke to him a few years ago about the installer side of things. He's an installer himself, plumbing and heating engineer. And what he's done is he's created this app wherein your tenants can call up in FaceTime and install it and get preventative maintenance done really quickly, really cheaply, without having to send a plumber out to first assess the problem and then send them out again to fix the problem. So we will talk about all the statistics of how this has been working and why he wants to introduce this to the group and get everyone's ideas. But that's what we've got next week, completely different. And I look forward to seeing you there. I look forward to the emails that will be going out about that later on this week.